Was Andrew Sheet of Morgan Stanley bullish on the future? A lot of people are right now, overwhelmingly so. Bullish coming into this trading week. Equity futures pulling back from all-time highs this morning at least. We're down by 0.3% on the S&P. On the Nasdaq, we're down by about a quarter. That's the equity setup going into the opening bell about 44 minutes away. As we count you down, here's the trading diary. Happening today, a White House press briefing later on this afternoon, plus a slew of Fed speak, including Barkin and Myron. On Tuesday, PMI data followed by comments from Fed Chair Jay Powell and President Donald Trump speaking at the UN General Assembly. On Thursday, another round of jobless claims, plus results from Costco. Finally, looking ahead to Friday, PCE data in between. Look out for the PMIs too. Talked about that a few times. It's an early reading on September. Are we starting to see a pickup, Ramo, in economic activity?
And this is something that we've heard about from a number of CEOs, that they actually saw the weakness earlier this year, and now they're seeing a reacceleration. Is that confined to the services? Is that confined to manufacturing? I think that PMIs is going to be really important. For the US dollar and for global fixed income. Let's look at that right now. Bill Campbell of Double Line writing the following. The Fed meeting sets up more curve steepening and a weaker US dollar. Interest rates will continue to be cut with inflation under control. Bill joins us now for more. Bill, welcome to the programme, sir. Let's talk about that curve steepening. So the front end story is dominated by interest rates and what the Fed does. Want your view on what's driving the long end right now and whether you and the team believe that the fiscal concerns will return?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think the fiscal concerns have gone anywhere. I think the fiscal concerns are both U.S. focused and international focused. Let's start in the U.S. We're watching for a continuing resolution to pass, but the Senate is going to need 7 Democrat votes to pass just a short-term funding resolution, and we're already seeing difficulties getting that passed. When we look, at the outlook, for the fiscal trajectory for the U.S., yes, we're going to have decent growth and hopefully, pick up further in revenues due to higher growth and tariffs. But next year's an election year, and spending, in our opinion, is likely to remain elevated. I don't think we can discount the international aspect either. We're seeing large fiscal deficits across the developed markets, from Europe, in the UK and France, to Japan, who's going into a leadership election where the candidates are focused on additional fiscal spending. One item that, well, several items caught my eye, but one item that caught my eye last week was in the UK's, the Bank of England's decision to keep interest rates on hold. They made an adjustment to their balance sheet policy. They decided that they needed to slow the pace of quantitative tightening, and they're going to be adjusting their sales of longer-term assets more to shorter-term assets. Due to the pressures on the long end of the curve. I think those fiscal pressures across developed markets can bleed through back to the U.S., but are going to be with us across the developed markets well into next year, leading to further steepening of the curve.
Bill, there's so much to unpack there. I just want to start with what's happened over the past few weeks, which has actually been flattening. How do you understand that, given the backdrop that you just laid out?
Absolutely. I think the flattening that we've seen is a bit of a buy the rumor, sell the news on the back of the Fed. Going into the Fed meeting, there was a lot of front running, trying to think. I think a lot of investors were trying to position on how quickly the rate cutting path would come, given the downgrade in the labor market. Jay Powell, although giving us the cut, still seems to be more finely balanced. And I was actually surprised that the only dissent for an additional cut was Steve Myron. I was looking to see what Waller and Bowman were going to do, and it does not look like they dissented for a cut this time around. So I think on the back of that, the shorter term, faster trading segment of the market took some profits on the steepener. We also went through, a couple of key levels. So I think that dragged CTAs, into reducing steepener positions just a little bit. But I think as investors, what we need to do is separate out what is the medium-term trend from the short-term cyclical trading trend. If you just look very microscopically in the past couple of days, we've started to see the creeping come back into the back end of the curve, especially on the 2s, 30s, where I believe it got down to a low of 114, and now we're back up to about 117. I think that this is probably an interesting place to enter back into steepeners as it's my opinion that fiscal concerns are going to come back to the top of the headlines, not only with the U.S. continuing resolution, but let's look at what happened in France. We are seeing protests, extremely large protests all around the expectation of, their future budget that's, that needs to be passed in a draft format in the next week or two.
Yeah.
I think there's lessons to be learned when we look at the international markets. One of the biggest ones is this rising social unrest or rising social tensions around less fiscal space. And I believe that's going to be with developed market economies over the next, at least through 2026, if not longer. So I think we're setting up for longer term steepening of the yield curve because one, we're going to have central banks trying to ease where they can. The Fed will be leading the way in this, but then the longer end is going to face not only fiscal pressures, but as central banks cut, trying to keep interest expense under control, that's also going to raise questions. One, about inflation expectations. What is the uncertainty around those? I think that's got to come with an increased term premium. And then we're going to have the questions about Fed credibility and Fed independence as the board, the mix of the board and potentially new members to the Fed are put in place next year.
Yeah, but Bill, some people would argue all of this does sound scary, and it sounds like it's been percolating for a while. And this was the argument earlier this year when you saw a sell-off in the long end of the yield curve. But there's more than $7 trillion in money market accounts that, as the Fed cuts, will migrate into duration, will migrate into credit, will migrate into other assets that can provide that same kind of income. Why is that wall of cash not enough of an argument to really dampen some of the steepening argument?
Well, I think the wall of cash is likely to go more into where we're focusing on, in the belly or front end of the curve, into credit markets and into international markets as well. There are other places besides the long end of the yield curve to put your money. And when we look at what happened post-Liberation Day with the correlations between equities and risk assets and the long end of the curve, I think that is something that a lot of institutions and institutional investors have taken note of. So I think that the fact that the Fed is continuing to lower interest rates, we're probably extending the path of a continued, let's call it, positive economic outlook with a backdrop that is probably good for risk. And that, I think, in my opinion, should support the trade for emerging market local currencies and local bonds. I think when we look at DoubleLine across all of the different sectors, we notice that valuations are tight pretty much everywhere except for that area of the market. And we're finding tremendous opportunities to pick up yield and to participate in uncorrelated returns by allocating to the larger, higher real yielding emerging market local currencies and local bonds.
Bill, you're giving us tons to talk about. Let's do it again soon. Bill Campbell there of DoubleLine talked a little bit about some of the DM concerns in the debt market. Let's talk about the EM concerns in the debt market. These headlines just crossing from the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, on Argentina.
Yeah, the Treasury Secretary coming out and basically saying all tools are in the toolbox. They will come out and use them. They're going to be meeting Milei tomorrow. He's going to be alongside the president. And this is really the key quote here when it comes to what they potentially could do with the stabilization fund. They include, not limited to, swap lines, direct currency purchases, purchase of U.S. dollar-denominated government debt from the Treasury's Exchange Stabilization Fund. And this grows on something that the Treasury Secretary spoke with Argentina's Milei in April when I was there. And it looks like potentially they're going to have to come to the rescue once again.
Yeah, because once again, Argentina is having a fiscal crisis, and as a result of Milei actually losing a number of elections. So it raises questions about his ability to keep going with some of the initiatives. Argentina is like the perpetual story. I mean, if you want an argument not to invest in an emerging market, I mean, Argentina is basically case study number one.
But I'm pleased you framed things in the way they did. They're not because of his policies. It's because of the very threat that we might not have them anymore.
Correct.
And that someone else might win these elections.
Right, and that could undermine the credibility. I mean, it just shows how unstable things are in that region.
Without a doubt. We'll have more on that region tomorrow ahead of that meeting. Coming up tomorrow, Keith Lerner of Truist, Kristen Bidley of Citi, Liz Ann Sanders of Charles Schwab, and Stephen Stanley of Santander. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Have a wonderful trading week. This was Bloomberg Surveillance.
Tune in to Bloomberg Business Week Daily.
We got to talk crypto.
From the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead.
What's the conversation around your company?
Bringing you insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy.
Planning very big things.
A new level of premium.
Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens.
The floodgates of innovation are going to open up.
You can't fake passion. You either are or you aren't.
Bloomberg Business Week Daily, only on Bloomberg.
I think people are paying attention now to what we're doing in a way that wasn't happening 5 years ago. I think the convergence, not just of the hardware investments, but the AI investments in particular, have been the real watershed for us in helping people understand why we've always believed having these devices be wearable and having sensors and having context in the world around you has been so important. And it's like, oh yeah, of course, now that you realize there's going to be a potentially super intelligent assistant that's operating there, you want it to have, for free, all the context on what you've heard, what you've seen, what you're doing, so it can help you the most out as you go about your day and try to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. So we feel a lot of vindication on that. I think the question is, will it be us? Will it be a competitor? That depends on our execution and their execution. I have a lot of confidence that the paradigm that we're in right now, which has been stable for a long time, right? The phone that you all have in your pockets now is roughly the same as the phone you had in your pocket 4 or 5 years ago. There's not really a lot of new innovation happening at that scale. There is a lot of things. The phone is the greatest consumer electronic device ever built, and yet there's also a lot of things that we wish it could do better or different. And I think with AI and integrated context with the world around us, that becomes more and more obvious. So I'm very confident that the paradigm will shift in that time frame. And you all know the saying, we get a lot less done in 1 year than we think and a lot more done in a decade. That really is going to be true, I think, when it comes to these shifts.
In case you missed it, on the close.
Sweetgreen, which has a kind of a similar business model to Kava, they're having some issues, and it's more about just the foot traffic. Maybe the price points are too high, or people have just moved on to other types of ways to feed themselves. What are you seeing?
We're not seeing anything underneath structurally in the business. If anything, we're seeing greater structural strength. In recent years, we've now underpriced CPI by 900 basis points. So again, our value scores continue to improve. We continue to make our food more accessible and really try and mitigate any of the impacts of, say, tariffs and not have to pass along to our guests.
There's been a lot of talk about how do you reimagine stores like this. What do you want your customer to do?
If you're in a hurry, we've got great digital channels. We've got 60 drive-through pickup windows. But if you want a great physical experience, you can have that walk the line experience, see the food, smell the food, interact with our team members. Our mission is to bring heart, health, and humanity to food. So we want to deliver that humanity in the four walls of our restaurants and have a great environment for you to enjoy your Mediterranean meal.
Don't miss The Close, live every weekday.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute economic news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Michael McKee in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, futures off a little bit to kick off the week. 30 minutes until the start of trading. I'm Matt Miller.
I'm Danny Berger. Bloomberg Open Interest starts right now.
Coming up, visa chaos. President Trump moves to curtail H-1B visas. It sends tech companies and their employees scrambling.
A C-suite shakeup. Oracle appoints 2 insiders to be co-CEOs as a TikTok deal nears.
And Pfizer is finally entering the obesity drug race on this M&A Monday. It's scooping up the startup Metsera for about $5 billion.
It's finally there, Matt, and the shares of Metsera are surging on that deal. Let's take a look at it because it is up a whopping 62%. As you said, this is a startup. It's developing a weight loss shot. It would be taken less often. I think it's once monthly instead of the market-leading drugs from Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, where you need to take once weekly. So a coup from Pfizer to be able to get it part of this.
Yeah, very interesting story. We're going to continue to follow that, as well as the Oracle story. It's going to provide provide security for a new version of TikTok's algorithm to keep the social platform in the U.S. But the company also announced the promotion of Clay Magouyrk and Mike Sicilia as co-CEOs, while naming outgoing CEO Safra Catz as vice chair. So a C-suite shakeup at Oracle. The shares in the pre-market down 0.8%. Danny?
Which is nothing for them, considering how much they have gained in recent weeks. Matt, we begin with our top story, though. President Trump slapping a hefty fee on H-1B applications. It's a move that threatens to upend the recruiting model used by outsourcing giants. Investor Kathy Wood weighed in earlier on Bloomberg.
So I think this is a little bit like tariffs, and it's going to capture all the headlines, and it's going to really take the oxygen out of the room, because there's a lot of really good fundamental activity happening in the United States. I just think this is part of the negotiation with India, and that when all is said and done, we're probably going to loosen up the H-1B visa program.
Joining us now is Bloomberg senior editor Mike Shepard. Mike, after this announcement, what kind of confusion was there among the biggest, specifically tech companies, that require the H-1B visa program to really get their lion's share of workers?
Well, Danny, it was really a weekend of chaos. The announcement on Friday, not long after our scoop, that this new $100,000 fee on the H-1B visa would be coming, really rattled them. And there were some reports that Microsoft had even told workers not to travel, to refrain from leaving the country if they had any plans to do so, out of fear that maybe this would complicate their ability to either renew or their permits to stay here and work here, or somehow complicate reapplication. The U.S. later followed up to say, no, this only applies to new visas, but it gives you an indication of what they're up against. And U.S. tech companies, including Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, Google, and Apple, all lean heavily on the H-1B program to bring talent in from abroad. And a lot of it, of course, comes from India. And separately, we are having the U.S. with a very intense trade negotiation lately with India over not only its tariffs, but the heavy tariffs that the U.S. is imposing on products from India, and this is over India's purchases of Russian oil. So there's a lot wrapped up in it, and the tech companies are trying to digest how
Mike, look at this chart.
What is going to happen next.
I mean, I don't think many Americans knew that the vast majority of these visas were going to people out of India, right? 72%. And the other thing that we haven't really been talking about much is that a massive amount of these H-1B visas are gotten through what the federal government calls fraud. You could call it cheating. Bloomberg's Eric Fan and Zach Miter wrote a great story on it last summer. And that half of these visas are going to outsourcing firms. So, yeah, maybe they're getting to Amazon, maybe they're getting to Meta, but they're going through IT staffing firms or outsourcing firms. And presidents and the Congress have been trying to deal with this cheating issue and figure out how to deal with this visa issue since the 90s. Is this maybe President Trump's way of dealing with it?
Well, they are certainly casting abuse as part of the justification for making these changes. And we've reported on these abuses last year, Matt, or this year in March, 470,000 applications for 85,000 slots, and that's a lot. But a number of the applications were submitted multiple times, our reporting has found. You cited the great work by our colleagues, Eric and Zach, and it really does point to how this program has been really fraught with issues. And there is the question of, are they going to all the right people? Are they going to people who maybe can help in other sectors? There's a lot of demand for this. Are they getting the people that they need, for instance, for the next generation of investment in the U.S.? And one thing, and this is something that Kathy Wood just alluded to, the idea that maybe they need to bring in workers for different high-tech jobs. And that would include expanding in the semiconductor manufacturing sector, for instance. Where would they stand in line, Matt, when it comes to trying to get access to those visas? Is India the right source for that? Would they rather get more people and maybe a different distribution geographically, say more from Taiwan and other locations? So this is something that the administration is going to be looking at, and they be looking at other means outside the H-1B visa program to keep that talent pipeline full, Matt.
Right. I mean, or if it costs $100,000 more to bring these people in, maybe you train up Americans to do that job is probably the idea, at least, that the Trump administration is pushing right now. Mike Shepard in Washington, we're going to hear a lot more from you about this throughout the day, and surely the story will last longer than that. Switching gears to Big Pharma, though, there's another huge story today. Pfizer is finally getting into the obesity drug game. It's going to pay $5 billion for a startup that makes an obesity pill, catching up a little bit to Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk. It's massively underperformed those two stocks over the past 5 years. We are joined now by Bloomberg health reporter Madison Muller. And Madison, you've been covering this amazingly for the last year or so as it's been picking up. Did you expect Pfizer to be getting in like this?
Kind of. So Albert Bourla had signaled a couple of months ago that they were eyeing, and Albert Bourla is the CEO of Pfizer, for those that don't know. Pfizer has been eyeing some of the smaller obesity startups in this space to potentially get in and do some type of deal. He had said that they were looking at potentially up to $15 billion, maybe doing a couple of different deals. So this sort of fits into the strategy that they had laid out a couple of months ago. Metsera is one of the newcomers in this obesity race. They have what's called a long-acting amylin drug, which is thought to potentially be a gentler option than drugs like Wegovy and Zepbound, which are known to have high rates of side effects, nausea, stomach discomfort. And so amylin's thought to maybe be a little bit of a better option for some people. However, Metsera is in early stages of development still. So in terms of catching up to Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, Pfizer is still probably a couple of years away from actually having a drug on the market.
And maybe we're all taking obesity pills by that point and not even shots. So those shares are higher this morning, but Kenvue, elsewhere in pharma, really getting hit hard. There was that Washington Post report that the Trump administration is planning to link the active ingredient in Tylenol to autism. What exactly would that report look like? What would the impact be on Kenvue?
Yeah, I mean, we're still trying to figure out the details of that. This is something that HHS and the Trump administration has been talking about for a couple months, saying that they are going to know the cause of autism by September. They had since walked back a little bit and maybe extended the timeline, but we are seeing now it's coming. This report's coming in September, and so they've talked about this a lot. We are still not super clear on what the details will be, whether it will also contain information about vaccines, which is something that HHS has been, and the Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has sort of been talking about the link between the debunked link between vaccines and autism for quite some time. So we're not exactly sure if there will be some more information about potential other causes or if it's just going to be focused on Tylenol. But that announcement is expected to come later today around 4 p.m.
All right, we'll see what that brings. Madison, thank you so much. That is Bloomberg's Madison Muller. Now, elsewhere, Oracle is taking over the algorithm for TikTok's U.S. business. Also, roughly about an hour ago, the firm announced a CEO change. Bloomberg Tech co-host Caroline Hyde has been all over the Oracle saga. Caroline, it's such an insane time for Oracle, be it for TikTok, be it for the AI infrastructure build-out. Why now announce a CEO change?
Well, Safra Katz has been there since, 26 years, working hand in hand with Larry Ellison. She's still going to as a vice chair of the overall business. It's interesting that in our Bloomberg reporting, we once showed that Safra Katz herself had actually been a little bit, questioning, cautious on the AI focus of Oracle more broadly, and the infrastructure, the cloud focus. But these two CEOs, co-CEOs coming to the fore are people who know that and have driven that particularly. Like since 2014, we've seen Clay Magouyrk at the business. He came in from Amazon, and he really has been pushing the AI infrastructure side of the equation. He's someone who therefore knows cloud deeply, and this is where the monumental market capitalization increase has gone to Oracle because of their play on serving for cloud, for AI infrastructure, for data center, the compute that is needed for Meta, for Microsoft, for OpenAI, and the more. We're also seeing, though, that the co-CEO that's coming on as well, Mike Sicilia, he's someone who knows AI applications deeply. So this is what they're going to be signaling. We are all in. We are all in on this particular part of the growth story. And these co-CEOs have been there for a while, in fact. I mean, since 2014 that Clay has been there. Many feel that actually he's kind of the guy in waiting who's going to take over from Larry, who still, of course, is the chair, but also the CTO of the business as well, being its co-founder.
I have to ask you about the Fox News story. Well, it's not a Fox News story. Fox shares are moving on the idea that the Murdochs are going to have something to do with TikTok, right? President Trump calling out Lachlan by name, also saying that Rupert will be involved. So how do they fit into this whole TikTok empire?
The assumptions have been, and the reporting in other outlets has been, that Fox, through its parent company, is likely to be one of those involved in the consortium. There have been names that have been linked and that President Trump spoke of in that Sunday interview that haven't been made public in the White House statements, for example. At the moment, we know the consortium is more around Silver Lake, around Oracle, around Andreessen and Horowitz, but there have been some other names that have been thrown in the loop by the president. But we still really need the details of what on earth this looks like. Initially, we were sat here on Friday saying that maybe we'll have a separate new app that we'll all have to migrate to. Well, me and Danny, I know you're not a big TikTok fan, Matt, but it's interesting that now they're saying, no, actually, Oracle would somehow own the algorithm. They'd lease it from them, and then they'd rebuild it from the ground up, and therefore this would be deemed safe. Then you seem to have a lot of US government participation in all of this and your own data. So it's going to be really interesting how they start to signal that this is A, safe, A, going to be as fun and as great an algorithm as it has been under ByteDance, and what on earth this detail of the deal looks like, because we still don't know how much ByteDance is really going to have. We know that about 6 out of 7 of the board helms are going to be US companies.
It's this feeling that we've learned so much, but still know so little about what this is actually going to look like. Caroline, thank you so much. Bloomberg Tech, Caroline Hyde. A quick check on futures this morning. As Matt pointed out, we are moving lower this morning after Friday hitting the 27th record high, lower by about 1/3% for most of those indexes. Matt, it's a pretty quiet week when it comes to data, but there's so many Fed speakers, 5 alone today. I think 18 events in total this week. So if we get something more hawkish, does that push futures even deeper, or stocks even further deeper into the red?
Yeah, I mean, if people start to pay more attention to inflation, Torsten Slok was out this morning saying 72% of the goods in the CPI basket are running above the Fed's target. But, I mean, for that to matter, you have to believe that the Fed wants to get to its target, which it doesn't look like they're that bothered
Mike Wilson
about.
say they're going to run it hot. Stocks are about.
They're going to keep running it hot. All right, coming up, Porsche shares drop by the most on record. The company's stock underperforms that of BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Ferrari, obviously, but even Aston Martin. We'll explain why next. This is Bloomberg Open Interest.
Morning, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Tom McKenzie in London. These are the stories that set your agenda.
Taking you from the U.S. market's close to the overnight session in Asia, we'll walk you through what you need to know to kickstart Europe's trading day. Live from our European headquarters, we bring you the day's top market-moving stories, unmatched expert analysis, and on-the-ground reporting from across the continent. Tune in to Daybreak Europe, only on Bloomberg Television. Context changes everything.
I'm Alex Rodriguez.
And I'm Jason Kelly.
And we're back with more episodes of our show, The Deal.
The theme of this season, On the Road. We're bringing you more behind-the-scenes conversations with the biggest names in sports, business, and culture, like Melody Hobson.
I started to study women's sports like an 11-year-old studies baseball statistics, and I got dangerous in seeing up arrows.
Susie Wolf.
When you're competing, you're not thinking about any fear or any worries of what could happen.
Josh Harris.
You can't do a good deal with a bad person.
Jay Batt.
At the end of the day, there's never been a better time to be a student athlete.
And more. Stay tuned.
Up-to-the-minute geopolitical news wherever and whenever it happens. I'm Anne-Marie Hordern in Alberta, Canada, and this is Bloomberg.
From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
Let's get now to high interest. Look at what's making headlines around the world. Crypto is getting slammed as more than $1.5 billion in bullish bets are wiped out, sparking the biggest wave of liquidations since March. Bitcoin is falling, and digital asset firms like Strategy are retreating. Meanwhile, old school havens like gold are hitting record highs, and precious metal stocks are rising thanks in part to the Fed's rate cut last week. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent pledged to provide all options for stabilization to the Argentine President Javier Milei as the South American country faces a market sell-off. Bessent and President Trump will meet with Milei in New York tomorrow at the UN General Assembly, and they said all options are on the table for stabilizing the currency. And T-Mobile is shaking up the corner office. Its COO, Srini Gopalan, will take over as CEO on November 1st, succeeding Mike Sievert after nearly 6 years. Sievert will move to a vice chair role, just like Safra Catz, staying on as a strategy advisor. Gopalan is a veteran of Deutsche Telekom and steps in as T-Mobile pushes deeper into fiber and 5G expansion. Sievert and Gopalan will join Bloomberg Technology today at 11. Actually, I'm sorry, we've shortened the name. It's just Bloomberg Tech, not technology. Porsche is scaling back on its EV dreams, shelving a future electric SUV and pivoting back to gas and hybrid powertrains. The pivot will cause, a $2.1 billion profit hit, and it sent Porsche shares down the most on record. The share price has fallen so low that it's going to be dropped off of the benchmark DAX index, or it's really, apparently, according to JP Barnard, a free float issue that's very complicated. The luxury icon, though, has now cut guidance for the 4th time this year. And as I said earlier, the shares, since they've been trading in Germany, are even underperforming Aston Martin, which is bad.
I know, and I remember when they debuted, Matt, and everyone was so pumped. Like, we were going to get a separate Porsche listing, and to your point, it's disappointed. With that latest disappointment, let's discuss it with Bloomberg's Craig Trudell, who leads our global autos coverage. Craig, I'm sure there was a lot of thought behind this because they have sunk so much into building out their EV business. Why make this change?
I mean, they sort of had their hand forced here, right? Where they had an initial electric vehicle that they brought to market, the Taycan, that in the early goings actually was doing okay, maybe not quite living up to expectations, but I think they came to the realization more and more that as they were bringing these electric vehicles out, the market was not as firm as they thought it might be. There were real concerns about also software issues within the Volkswagen Group that have been an absolute mess and sort of pushed back rollouts. I think all the while you also have just real issues in terms of trade, where this is a brand that is right up there in terms of being affected by tariffs. And not having any U.S. manufacturing presence, and not a sort of clear option to add manufacturing presence because they don't share any platforms with Volkswagen models that are built here in the U.S. So a lot of sort of inputs here that sort of contribute to them saying, you know what, we need to completely rethink our product portfolio. We
were showing video of the 911, which of course still reigns supreme as like the sports car of choice for those who have money, but the Taycan has been, let's show the electric version. The Taycan has been a huge critical success, and people who actually drive it and charge it, it's a very fast charger, here it is, really love it. It seems like the problem is getting consumers over that hurdle, right, to actually take the plunge. And what Scout has done, which is another Volkswagen brand, Danny and I went down and saw the prototype last week in downtown New York, has been to pivot to offering a small range extender. And now 70% of people who've reserved a Scout have chosen that model. Why doesn't Porsche just do this with like the Taycan and whatever electric SUV they were going to make?
I think we are going to see this brand pivot to hybrids. I think within hybrids, I think we would throw EREVs, extended range electric vehicles, into that mix. And there is, I think there's got to be a lot of questions internally and externally about, what were they thinking? Should they have gone in this direction from the beginning? I think there was a sort of expectation that, and it wasn't necessarily totally unfounded, that people with means were going to be more inclined to go electric, given the fact that it still is going to be more expensive than combustion vehicles for some time. There was sort of a thought that we could get the people who have the means to afford that to make the switch before the rest of the market. But we've seen some real pushback with these performance brands, Porsche being right up there in terms of the consumer of Porsche, particularly a 911 buyer. We've heard this brand say straight up, we're just not going to make a fully electric 911. It's just not going to happen.
Meanwhile, BYD, which at least was a leader in China and able to fend off some of the competition issues, down like 30% from its peak 4 months ago, and now Warren Buffett is backing off of his entire holdings in it. Is this a sign that the fortunes have really turned for BYD?
I think it's sort of a little bit of a kick while BYD is down, because we have seen over the last few months real concerns about the Chinese government not being tolerant of the aggressive price moves within the Chinese auto market. BYD perhaps being the biggest and most sort of concerning player from that perspective. So you've already seen this sort of route taking place. You now have a situation where we've seen this sort of slow motion move by Berkshire Hathaway to move out of that holding. We're now seeing it go to zero. I do think we should dwell, though, on the fact that this was an incredible bet for Berkshire, even as they're sort of, getting out after a bit of, profit being taken off the table by this, stock move of late. It was a hugely, hugely profitable bet for Berkshire, and, sort of yet another feather in Buffett's cap.
Craig, great having you here. How long are you here?
Just today and tomorrow.
All right, well, we're going to have you back on. We're going to have you back on tomorrow as well. Craig Trudell is leads our global autos coverage. He's covered, as I always say, cars for us out of Detroit, out of Tokyo, and now out of London, so he has a wealth of experience. By the way, I'm looking at Porsche shares. Since they went public, they're down 42%. And in the same period, Aston Martin is only down 36%. So, I mean, it's pretty shocking, because AML stock has traditionally been the biggest dog. And then, of course, you put them up against Ferrari, which is the big winner, gaining 162% in the same time period.
That's massive.
Yeah.
Good for Ferrari.
Ferrari has done very well. And I guess they haven't made this. They weren't early in EVs, right? They haven't got a full EV vehicle yet. So still ahead, we're going to discuss the H-1B visa issue, its $100,000 fee, and the potential impact on earnings, especially across tech, with strategist Seema Shah of Principal Asset Management. This is Bloomberg Open Interest.
From the beating heart of global finance, economics, and politics, and wherever newsmakers are moving markets, Bloomberg brings you conversations that allow for deep discussions and important insights. What do you think the future is for inflation? Is this new normal? Are markets too optimistic? How do you worry about the things that are outside your control? How does the current fighting completely stop? I'm Francine Lacqua, and this is The Pulse, every weekday only on Bloomberg.
Get your fixed income fix. Watch Bloomberg Real Yield around the world right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Middle East and Africa. Vibrant resources and high-yield investment opportunities abound. Join me on Horizons Middle East and Africa for the stories, newsmakers, and insight from this exciting region. Now weekdays, only on Bloomberg.
Used to be one would say, what's that got to do with the price of tea in China, when they wanted to poke holes in the relevance of something? Now though, if you're in tune with how events around the world affect each other, it becomes clear that the current going rate of tea in China has a lot to do with a lot of things, not just tea things either, but tariffs, franchises, and IPOs. How much?
The countdown is on. Everything you need to get the edge at the end of the market day. Get ahead of tomorrow's trading with The Close. Weekdays on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Less than 4 minutes ago until the opening bell, a check on futures this morning. We're down by about 0.2% for both the S&P and NASDAQ. Russell 2000 futures down a third. It has been the Russell 2000 that's been leading us higher after a 27th record high for the S&P 500 on Friday. All right, your market open coming up next.
Let me break down our CapEx into the buckets that we spend. Big part of it is to expand our reach of fiber. You cannot wait until there is certainty to build that. These have long lead times that require you to have conviction about where demand is going. Another bucket is, as more people are on our network, we also have to add more coverage and capacity. It's almost like a variable expense. Third, we are modernizing our wireless network right now. Through the investments we're making, we are driving down our unit costs over time and providing more capacity to serve the demand that we think is coming.
Do you have less confidence in that 3-year plan now than when you first came out with it, given that some people are having trouble deciding how things are going to look in the next 3 days?
No, I really don't. I look at the nature of our business. It doesn't matter the economic cycle. It is a critical goods or service, and we have every confidence demand for it will remain. Will it be harder in a more challenged economic environment if that ends up being the case? Of course, but remember, we are investing at record levels. Slight moderations of that would allow us to deliver a lot more incremental cash to the bottom line. So I have every confidence we're going to be able to deliver our guidance.
Making money isn't about drowning in emotions. It's about understanding what's actually happening. Markets are the best way to glean signal from noise, and that is what we try to do every morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
We are moments away from the start of trading on this Monday morning. This is Bloomberg Open Interest. I'm Matt Miller. Let's get a quick check on what futures are doing ahead of the bell. Right now, we're looking at a drop of 0.25% on S&P futures, NASDAQ futures down about 0.2, and Russell futures off 0.25% as well. On the New York Stock Exchange, Mike Waltz is ringing the opening bell. He is our representative to the UN, but he kicked off his career as a U.S. Army Special Forces member. The guy has 4 Bronze Stars and initially started out in politics advising Dick Cheney. And he's had a long run, first Army Special Forces member to be elected to Congress out of Florida's 6th Congressional District. There on the NASDAQ is Prince Albert. Not in a can, but he's here for the UN for Climate Week, I should say. He is, of course, the reigning, I guess, monarch of Monaco, right?
Yeah, which, like, great to be a citizen of Monaco. You pay no taxes, you get subsidized housing. So if Prince Albert wants to adopt me, I'm very happy.
You have a yacht.
Yeah.
There's a great race every year.
Correct. I could get used to that. All right, Matt, some stocks that we're looking at with the market opening. Metsera shares up a whopping 57%. Pfizer's going to be buying the startup that makes obesity weight loss medication for nearly $5 billion. Now, the key for Metsera, it's developing a weight loss shot. It would be taken less often than the market-leading drugs from Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk. Of course, we were talking to Madison Moeller earlier, who said it's going to take some time to develop this. So by that point, are we all going to be taking obesity pills anyway, and shots become irrelevant?
Yeah, I guess I feel like at some point a lot of people are going to, but let's see how that shakes out. Oracle will provide security for a new version of TikTok's algorithm to keep the social platform in the U.S. We desperately want to keep this Chinese social media platform alive for the kids. The company also announced the promotion of Clay Magouyrk and Mike Sicilia as co-CEOs while naming outgoing CEO Safra Catz as vice chair. And I feel like that's an even bigger move, right?
Yeah.
But everyone's so obsessed with TikTok that's like more important news than anything else.
Not than Oracle like spending tons of money on AI infrastructure, because that's been moving the stock, not TikTok. But the kids.
TikTok. So important. So important to make sure you get on TikTok and watch as much of it as possible.
Yes, I know, which is exactly how you spend your evenings, Matt. Anyway, elsewhere, for this equity market, we are lower this morning as the session gets underway, but Morgan Stanley's Mike Wilson sees investors shifting focus away from labor market concerns in 2026. Wilson says that the stock market outlook hinges on the pace of Fed rate cuts, with steep interest rate cuts fueling strong revenue and earnings growth. Let's bring in Principal Asset Management Chief Global Strategist Seema Shah. Seema, there is some irony to this, shifting away from labor market concerns. I'm not sure this equity market ever cared about labor market concerns, trading at all-time highs. What exactly is priced in to this U.S. equity market right now?
Hi, Danny. Yeah, I think that the market today, I mean, at the moment, given how well they're doing, what it's focused on is this idea that, yes, the economy is slowing, but it's not heading towards recession. And that weakness in the labor market is just simply given the Fed a green light to further ease financial conditions and give the equity market a little bit of a boost. So all in all, it's quite positive. But I think Mike is right in saying that we have to keep an eye on inflation. You know, we've seen the tariffs have kind of been delayed a little bit. So in terms of the impact of when it's going to hit prices, everything has been pushed a few months out. I have to say, we're not anticipating a very significant move up in inflation, you know, up to kind of the low 3% level, and then to be quite temporary. But, you know, realistically, nobody really knows how this is going to pan out. So it's going to be incredibly important for investors and, of course, for the Fed to keep an eye on how that's going.
When you're planning investment strategy, when you're putting together models, Seema, when you're trying to figure out what's going on in this market, do you ever consider the fact that the Fed actually would want to push inflation down to 2%? Or is that just something they say? They're fine with 3%?
It's a good question, because obviously, as we've seen from their economic forecast projections, that it's always 2 years out when they're going to hit 2%. So you have to treat it with a pinch of salt, knowing that maybe that they're aiming to push inflation down towards the 2% level. But because they have all of these, the employment mandate as well, that has to take a bit of their focus. I think it is important, you know, if you were to see inflation expectations picking up next year and inflation rising meaningfully, then I do think that it would slow them down in their path towards getting towards neutral. But certainly at this stage, it doesn't seem pertinent enough to stop the Fed from cutting rates.
Well, the rally that we've gotten with the anticipation of rate cuts, and indeed the first one, it hasn't just benefited U.S. stocks, Seema. Over the past 3 months, it's actually been EM and Russell small cap stocks that have outperformed. It's been so long that if you were to try to bet against anything other than U.S. large cap stocks, you would have gotten smacked. That has changed, but how sustainable is it?
Yeah, and I think this has been a real question for us as well with our research teams of trying to understand, is this small cap rally something which is going to run out of steam very quickly, just as it has in the past, or is this something which can be sustained for a little bit longer? And I'd say that the fundamentals are definitely looking a lot better than I think many would have anticipated. Of course, the interest expense is coming down, but also in terms of profitability, these companies are looking much stronger. So I think this could be sustained, and it's certainly worth, as long as you do believe that the economic outlook isn't very negative, that you can dip your feet in that. And then from an emerging markets perspective, I think everything is lining up to a continuation of this quite positive trend, where you do have Fed rate cuts, you still have global growth quite positive, and then we also have a perspective of a slightly weaker dollar going forward. So those three things should really continue to spell positive news for emerging markets. And then, of course, remember, China's doing pretty well too, so that's going to be adding to that narrative.
When you look at the H-1B issue and you see that companies who pay these visa holders on average, I think around $120,000 a year, they're going to have to pay an extra $100,000 to get them in. So raising that cost substantially. Do you foresee any of that coming down to the bottom line when you look at earnings in 26 or 27?
I mean, it certainly could do. I think just like there has been with all of the policy announcements this year, so much is dependent on those details. Is it, as has been indicated so far, that it's really for new applicants rather than existing applicants? I think the hammer is going to really hit hard on some of these smaller tech companies, the ones that really need to continue on in innovation. But I think from a longer-term perspective, assuming that the rules are maintained and through the next couple of years, it's a real question on innovation for the US. How far can technology go before you start to see a bit of a catch-up? So I don't think this is necessarily a moment for rethinking the trade, but I think that it could, in the longer term, have some impact on the strength of technology in the US if they're not able to grab some of those most skilled workers from other countries.
Hey, Seema, really great to get your thoughts this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Principal Asset Management's Seema Shah. All right, let's get a check on the equity market right now. About 7 minutes into your trading day, we are moving lower with 388 stocks on the S&P 500 moving to the downside. On the upside this morning, though, Apple leading the pack in terms of point change. Apparently, the CEO of T-Mobile was on CNBC earlier saying that iPhone 17s were flying off the shelf. So maybe that's helping share prices up 2.2%. Tesla, Meta, some of the other Mag 7s that are higher in this session. To the downside, though, Amazon is the biggest drag. We were talking about H-1B visas. Amazon is one of the big users of this among the big tech companies. Nvidia a little bit weaker this morning, as is Microsoft, as is JP Morgan. Again, JP Morgan, another one of these companies that uses that program. When it comes to the individual sectors that are moving this morning, only tech is higher. Again, it is Apple helping things out here. Infotech up 0.2%. Meanwhile, it is financials with that big decline in JP Morgan, followed by consumer staples in healthcare. So kind of interesting. Some of the more safety sectors are down this morning, but overall, we're still weaker by 0.1%, Matt.
All right, so a big skew to the downside for sure. Coming up, Bloomberg Intelligence says the offshore IT model will be upended by the new H-1B visa fee, $100,000. They picked some of the key IT stocks to watch, and we'll show them to you next. This is Bloomberg Open Interest.
At what point do you say, we made a mistake and we're getting out? How long do you give it before you say, this isn't working?
That's one of the most critical differentiators between great investors and just mediocre investors. Because on one hand, you have to have confidence and conviction in all the work you've done, the decision you've made, that if you have a little stumble here and there, if you immediately are selling out, you're never really going to fully realize that the depth of potential long-term success. And yet on the other hand, if you're stubborn and you refuse to admit I'm wrong, you continue to think the market's wrong and I'm always right, then you'll get caught in some very, very difficult positions over time. So that ability to have a fresh perspective, take in the new information, even when things aren't going the way that you'd expect or to hope, and to really understand from this price point today, is this still going to be one of the most compelling investments or not?
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives.
And laying the foundation for the future.
From finance to defense, AI to entertainment.
And from the road to the stars. Bloomberg brings you the latest stories of the people and companies pushing the tech sector to new frontiers.
And the politics that shape global tech markets.
I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
Watch Bloomberg Tech every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg Television.
U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers Jobs Day like Bloomberg.
Astonishing day for U.S. technology.
It's shaping the region's technology ecosystem.
Asia's biggest tech news and innovation.
All right, okay, ready?
David, what initially sparked your interest in this topic of longevity?
15 years ago, I turned 60, and I began to wonder how much longer I'm likely to live and what I could do to extend my life. On longevity, I talk with the leading experts in science and medicine to educate people about how they might be able to change their conduct so that they can live a happier and healthier life. I'm David Rubenstein. Join me on a 4-part journey as I explore the great quest for longevity. Only on Bloomberg.
12 minutes into your trading day, moving lower across all the major indices, down by about 0.2 for the S&P, not by about exactly 0.2%. After hitting a 27th record high on Friday, we pull back ahead of a lot of Fed speak this week. 5 of the voting members of the FOMC will be giving speeches this week. Let's look at some of the top calls, some of the analyst action that we are focusing in on this morning. First up, Steve Madden gets an upgrade at Piper Sandler. Analysts there say the shoemaker took an outsized hit from tariffs and should start seeing recovery ahead of its peers. Those shares up 3.2%. On the other foot, great pun, I see what you did there, producers. Crocs is getting a downgrade grade from the firm because of weakening demand in the U.S. People don't want to wear Crocs anymore, down 4.25%. Next up, Lennar is getting cut to a sell at Raymond James. The analyst, who is the only Wall Street bear on the stock, says that the home builder is facing multiple headwinds. Last week, Lennar reported disappointing fourth quarter forecast. Finally, Keurig Dr. Pepper, that gets a downgrade at BNP Paribas Exane. The analyst called the company's agreement to merge with JDE Peet, quote, one of the worst received deals we can recall in consumer staples. Those shares down 2%, Matt.
That's harsh.
Very harsh.
One of the worst in consumer staples, and there are a lot of bad deals in consumer staples.
There are a lot of bad deals, so yeah.
All right, let's get back to the H-1B visa story. Bloomberg Intelligence says that the $100,000 application fee could damage the offshore IT services model. And maybe decimate it. BI senior analyst Anurag Rana says to watch companies like Infosys, Cognizant, Tata, as well as others, they'll be forced to redesign their pricing plans. Anurag joins us now. And I mean, what are these companies, Anurag, paying their employees? I think it's around $90,000 or $100,000. This fee like doubles that right off the bat. They just can't do that kind of business here anymore, can they?
No, it's going to be very difficult for them to operate in the current environment. So in the sense that they will not be able to easily move people here. Now, the question is, what are the clients going to do? You know, if you're a large bank, if you are a big retailer, and you really need some project done, do you figure out a way to, you know, get it done yourself? but there's a shortage of IT professionals in the US. So you're going to offshore a lot more work. So I think the filing of H-1Bs from a lot of these large companies will come to a fair, I would say, reduction over the next several years if this 100,000 fee remains.
And Anurag, again, as Matt pointed out, you write how a classic IT or outsourcing model no longer becomes viable, called a pyramid staffing models. What exactly is the model they use that makes H-1B visas so necessary to them?
So think about it this way. We have several kind of different operations in a particular company. Let's say you're looking at tech consulting. In that particular case, you actually need humans to be on site with these executives trying to figure out what their next generation technology infrastructure would be. The second example could be you just have to maintain or see if the Office applications are running. You can do that remotely. So it depends on the task. There is a ratio of offshore to onshore. So for every, let's say, one person they bring on board in the US, there may be 4 people somewhere in a low-cost country helping out with that task. So that's the offshore-onshore mix that I'm talking about. Right now, it's going to basically be very difficult to do that. So either you're going to have an offshore model or you're going to have an onshore model.
We had a story, Anurag, I'm sure you saw last summer, about how so many companies, especially these multinational outsourcing companies, were gaming the system. You know, because it was like a lottery system and they were just buying like 50 tickets. Is this going to make the H-1B visa system at least in some ways more fair or easier to understand, even if it makes it more expensive?
I think, you know, the abuse cases will definitely, I mean, I would say could be eradicated in this particular case, definitely. But the big question is going to be what's somebody like a Microsoft or Amazon going to do, because they are hiring those employees to be in the US to do those works. Now, the question is, do they actually develop more R&D centers in near locations such as Latin America, Canada, just for the time zone regions, or they do expand that into their global delivery centers across the board, you know, just in places like India, for example?
Anurag, though, are some of those big tech giants maybe better positioned, obviously still getting hit, but better positioned just because they have the profitability to absorb higher costs and already have large staff bases that, to our understanding, aren't going to face any sort of ex post facto type of higher cost for the H-1B visa?
See, the argument could be, and then, you know, we have heard this argument from the administration also, if the employee is so special, so great, you will pay them an extra $100,000 or spend them, that's not a big deal. Well, I contend that those kinds of visa go in a different category called L1, which is for managers, which is for people with exceptional ability. If you have an H-1B and the average, you know, let's say the compensation is somewhere around 100, 150,000, or maybe even 200,000, you're not just going to go out and raise another 100,000 on top of it. So the economics doesn't work for a large portion of the H-1Bs.
I wonder what you think about Oracle. Obviously, you and Mandeep put on this fantastic AI conference every year, and you have a lot of guests who are from Oracle or working with Oracle. Now they have 2 new CEOs. Was it time for that? And also, in general, as someone who covers companies, Anurag, co-CEOs, is that a good idea?
Well, you know, Oracle has a history of co-CEOs. Safra and Mark Hurd were co-CEOs back then, and, you know, unfortunately, Mark passed away. But Safra has done such a good job of managing this entire transition for Oracle from a legacy company to an AI, you know, infrastructure company. And I'm sure these 2 executives will, you know, accelerate that particular push. In fact, one of them is the head of OCI, or the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So I really don't think, I mean, make much out of this particular one. But, you know, co-CEOs not. But always remember, Larry's still running the show.
Yeah, and, you know, now that Safra Katz is out, we can say it takes 2 men to do the job of 1 woman. Anurag, thank you very much. Anurag Rana of Bloomberg Intelligence. I had to get that one in. Okay.
I think it's important.
Coming up, Pfizer enters the obesity drug race. We have the details of this morning's big deal that's coming up next. This is Bloomberg Open Interest.
bringing you up to the minute economic news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Jennifer Zabasaja in Luanda, Angola, and this is Bloomberg.
Why do the biggest names in business choose Bloomberg Television?
That's a great question.
It's a very good question.
Interesting question. Good question.
Great question.
I so appreciate that question.
You certainly ask interesting questions.
Bloomberg Television. Top experts, great questions.
I'm David Weston. Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. We go on the road for a look at what lies behind the headlines of today and what will likely be the headlines tomorrow.
We need more transparency. Oil and gas is still important.
They said every citizen should be investing in the market.
Accelerate progress in all fields of science.
Watch Wall Street Week right here on Bloomberg. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute political news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Tyler Kendall in Washington, and this is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Open Interest. I'm Matt Miller. Let's get a quick check on what stocks are doing 20 minutes into the session. We're looking at red arrows here, but not big drops. 0.1% on the S&P 500 to 66.56 keeps us still pretty darn close to an all-time high. Same is true on the NASDAQ, which is unchanged here at 24,619. Taking a look at what's going on in stocks, as yields aren't moving much at all, and neither is the dollar. You can see NVIDIA is down about 0.5%. That doesn't help. Apple is gaining about 2% as you get really positive, not only reviews. Mark Gurman seemed to love the iPhone 17, but also customers lining up to grab them. Snapchat is gaining right now on maybe the TikTok reorganization. You can see Meta also up about 0.7% after releasing some new glasses. Pfizer right now up 2.5% after it purchases Metacera for $5 billion to get into the obesity pill market. And Metacera, you can see soaring a 61% gain. Danny.
Matt, let's get more on that story on the Pfizer-Metacera deal. We're joined now by Bloomberg Intelligence Director of Research, Sam Fazeli. Sam, how crucial was it that Pfizer got some sort of a foothold in the obesity market with this most recent deal?
Yeah, hi. So this is a deal that I think a lot of people were expecting from Pfizer, given that their own efforts in obesity hit a brick wall with some of the data that we're getting. Their products weren't competitive. Crucial, well, look, Pfizer needs drugs to help plug a hole that generics are going to create for it. So they've got drugs like Vyndaqel, drugs like Eliquis that are going off patent. That's a certainty. Here, what they're doing is going into a space where everybody believes is so large that even if you have, or whatever you want to call them, Me Too assets, you still should be able to get some revenue and therefore help you there. Now, the assets from Metsera we like, but they're early stage, and there's a lot of work and wood to be chopped here. And hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years, well, actually quite soon, we know some phase 2B data coming. But what you hope for Pfizer is that the world doesn't change again over the next 2 or 3 years. You know, I've been calling this like a game of snake and ladders. You seem to be doing really well, and then you have a better data that shows, oh my God, there's too high a vomiting rate or a nausea rate with the drug when they go into later stage trials. So there's a lot to be proven, but it's a step in the right direction.
What's the, by the way, Sam, what's the addressable market? I mean, the United States obviously has the heaviest people in the world, right? We need this. Mm-hmm. And in terms of people taking these pills, what's the success rate or the shots?
Yeah, well, so this has only been through a phase 2 trial, and we got some later stage phase 2 data coming. So, you know, based on a 12-week trial, the efficacy seemed on par with what we're seeing with the incumbent drugs from definitely the better one of the two from Lilly in terms of efficacy. Now, this was a small trial. We need to see how it performs. It's tolerability that's super important here. There's no point helping people lose I don't know, about 15, 20 kilos if you're spending half your day dealing with nausea and vomiting, right? So it's that we need to see. They looked okay, but we need to see better data coming out. I've got some clients who are calling it the vomit drug as opposed to an obesity drug. So let's wait and see what that data comes out. And in terms of addressable market, I think my colleague Michael Shaw has just updated his numbers. He's in the region of $100 billion. I mean, honestly, as you rightly said, it's such a big potential. It's all a matter of whether governments and healthcare systems are prepared to pay for it and how long people stay on the drugs. So lots of algebra here to figure out.
Yeah, God, the vomit drug, that's not a name you want.
That's not very nice, no.
Hey, Sam, less than a minute here, but you talked about the world looking different in 2 years. What is at risk for Pfizer of what the world may look like in 2 years?
The risk is that some of the newer combinations come out with efficacy that's better, or side effect profile that's better, or the combination thereof, and or you end up in a place where your quality of weight loss is better. You lose weight, but you don't lose it from muscle. Those are all the areas that people are fighting over. And of course, once a month injection, once every quarter injection, once every 6 months injection. We'd all prefer that sort of thing. So there's a lot to play here.
All right, Sam, thanks very much. Sam Fazeli there of Bloomberg Intelligence talking about the race to give us the best fat pill. Coming up in the next hour, Threadneedles and Barry on the new social media hierarchy with the TikTok deal. Plus, we'll talk consumer sentiment and holiday spending expectations with MasterCard's Michelle Meyer. This is Bloomberg Open Interest.
This villa, very traditional, a lot of things of the past.
I live my very first independent life in the farmhouse, and I built it by the memory of the farmhouse, the philosophy they believe, yin yang 5 elements, the concept of the life, of the happiness. They build this kind of roof like boat, and man and woman, and bowl of rice. Everyone should be happy if have somewhere to live, something to eat, and someone to love.
So you're defined a lot by your past experiences.
Yeah, actually, I'm a lucky man because not everyone should have the experience of the war and peace, poor and rich, technology progress, a change during my life, rich by experience.
There's an appreciation for what you have now.
And therefore, peace is the most important thing for today, for Vietnamese, and I think for human being, for the world.
Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Anand, only on Bloomberg.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute energy news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Joanna Bersecci in Vienna, and this is Bloomberg.
is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Progressive Insurance.
I'm Deborah Rodriguez. The Trump administration is set to make an announcement today, reportedly linking autism to women who take Tylenol while they're pregnant. CBS News medical contributor Dr. Celine Gounder says studies refute that claim.
The most recent BEST study was conducted among 2.5 million kids in Sweden, and the advantage of that particular study was that they looked at siblings, which allowed them to factor out some of the genetic risk factors and so on, and they did not find an association between taking Tylenol in pregnancy and a child having autism.
The Washington Post reports Health Secretary Kennedy hopes to fast-track approval of a form of vitamin B9, a folate, as the first potential autism treatment. FBI and Justice Department officials confirm they've shut down an investigation into border czar Tom Homan after a Post report he was caught on tape accepting a bag filled with $50,000 in cash from an undercover FBI agent at the end of the Biden administration. CBS's Scott McFarland.
The White House called the investigation blatantly political, and they denied the Trump administration leaned on the Justice Department not to charge Homan, while some Democratic lawmakers have called for Homan to be fired immediately.
There's a court hearing today in New Hampshire for a suspect who allegedly shot and killed a man while he was eating dinner with his family at a country club and wounded two others. CBS's Lilia Luciano is in Nashua.
The 23-year-old suspect is now facing one second-degree murder charge, but more are expected today. Police say that they are looking for a motive, but they confirmed that he used to work at the country club where the shooting happened.
San Franciscans were jolted out of bed early this morning.
The 4.3 magnitude earthquake struck just before 3 a.m. near the UC Berkeley campus. DeAndre Pope was working the graveyard shift at a nearby hospital.
It felt like the elevator just hit the floor. You know, it made a loud banging noise. The glass shook up.
The glass broke at Magnani's butcher shop. A large front window cracked down the middle, but owner Trino Cruz was taking it all in stride.
We live in an earthquake zone, so, it's something that we have to deal with. We have to live with it.
Matt Bigler for CBS News, Berkeley, California.
Gabrielle has powered up to a Category 3 hurricane in the Atlantic southeast of Bermuda. CBS meteorologist Grant Gilmore.
Gabrielle is going to remain a good 800 miles off the east coast of the United States, but it will still produce the threat for dangerous surf and rip currents from the Carolina coast to New England.
Dow is down 143 points in early trading. S&P off 3. This is CBS News. Some teams will be working on the kicking game after yesterday's wild action in the NFL.
In Cleveland, the Packers had a chance to go ahead of the Browns with a late field goal.
On the right hash, Daniel Whelan the hold. The kick is blocked. It is blocked.
The Browns went on to win with a field goal as time ran out. In Philadelphia,
Joshua Carty has it blocked again.
A blocked field goal and touchdown iced the Eagles' win over the L.A. Rams on Fox. And in Tampa, the Jets blocked a Bucs field goal and ran it in for a go-ahead touchdown, but Tampa Bay rallied to win. Steve Kathan, CBS News.
It's hard to make a buck on Broadway these days.
In Cleveland, the
and good reviews haven't helped. Both Gypsy and Sunset Boulevard failed to recoup producers' investments. Deborah Rodriguez, CBS News.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Scarlett Fu and Paul Sweeney.
How do you think the Fed is looking at tariffs, the uncertainty of tariffs?
Let's take a look at the sectors and how they performed.
A lot of investors getting whipsawed every day by news events.
Breaking market headlines and corporate news from across the globe.
Could we see a market disruption, a market event?
Are people just too exuberant out there?
You see some so-called low-quality stocks driving this short-term rally.
Bloomberg Intelligence with Scarlett Fu and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
Good Monday morning from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York City to our worldwide audience. Scarlett Fu, Paul Sweeney live with you. Coming up today, we're going to check in with Matthew Bloxham. He's a Bloomberg Intelligence tech analyst. What does all this tariff, the H-1B visa thing mean for some of these technology companies, and what does it mean for U.S.-India ties? So we're going to break that down. Sylvia Jablonski, CEO and CIO of Defiance ETFs, we'll get her thoughts on these markets. Miles Miller, Bloomberg News senior reporter, he's going to give us a preview of the UN. Hopefully he's nowhere near the UN.
I saw him in the office, so he's clear for now.
Okay, so he's traffic-wise, he's fine. John Tucker, we don't know how John Tucker's going to get home today with the traffic.
I'll be stuck on 3rd Avenue until about midnight.
Until the end of the week.
Yeah, end of the week.
Possible.
Very good. We're also going to have a tech roundtable. Mandeep Singh, Bloomberg Intelligence senior tech analyst, Anurag Rana. We're just going to talk TikTok, maybe just TikTok, maybe a little Oracle too. So we got a lot coming up here in the next couple of hours. Let's kick it all off with John Tucker and a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, guys, this flash brought to you by IBKR. Will December 2025 CME E-mini S&P 500 index futures settle above $6,200 at September 30th, 2025? At IBKR forecast trader, the yes was recently at 80%. Start predicting today at ibkr.com/forecast. The last trading day for this contract is September 30th. Well, after records last week, the major stock averages, they're mixed right now. The NASDAQ composite index 30 points higher. Now, that's good enough for a record. Right now, 9 of the 11 major industry groups in the S&P 500, they're lower. Energy, the biggest drag. Information technology, that group is higher. That is home to Apple. It is up close to 2% within striking distance of record territory. Consumer discretionary, that's another higher group in the S&P 500. And that is home to shares of Tesla. Of course, we'll take a deeper dive into this in just a bit, but the big news of the day, Pfizer paying $4.9 billion for the obesity startup Metsera. They're trying to catch up with rival drug makers. Metsera shares 62% higher right now. Pfizer is also higher. That is up close to 3%. And assets in Argentina surging. This comes after the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent signaled his support for the country's financial position. S&P 500 right now, let's call it unchanged, up fractionally 66.63 on the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 85 points. The NASDAQ right now, that is up 25 points again, up 0.1%. This is interesting. This storm on the other side of the world, Cathay Pacific canceling all Hong Kong flights through from Tuesday 6 p.m. through Thursday morning. Again, a typhoon that lashing the area. Just horrible.
One of my friends on Facebook mentioned that she was on hold with Cathay for about 7 hours trying to get herself rebooked. Can you imagine?
Good Lord.
Typhoons, they are what hurricanes are in this part of the world, right?
Yeah.
That's similar, right? That intensity. Wow. Yeah.
So just look out. Anyway, we check the markets for you and other stuff all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Scarlett and Paul, it's like been how long since I've last seen you?
Since you last saw me, about a half a week. Since you last saw Paul and Mike me together,
Exactly.
2 weeks.
Exactly. So we've been out and about. All right, JT, thank you very much. We appreciate that. Let's take a look at some of the stocks on the move today. I'm Paul Sweeney alongside Scarlett Fu, and we're joined by Bloomberg's Christine Aquino. Christine, before we get to your stocks, what's this Aura thing that John Tucker was just writing about? What does this company do?
It will change your life, Paul. I highly recommend. It is a fitness ring, which I'm wearing right now.
Ring.
Fitness and more, actually. It tracks your wellness. It gives you a readiness score for the day. It tells you how much activity you should do, or maybe you should take it easy. You know, it's a handy little wellness
Remember the mood
buddy.
rings that they used to sell?
Yeah, does it change colors?
It doesn't change colors yet, but who knows? Maybe now that they're an $11 billion company, they might be working on that.
They sold a couple million rings last year.
That's right.
Wait, hold on, Christine. How much did you pay for the ring, and how much do you pay for the service monthly?
Well, okay, so I can't remember. It was a few $100s for the ring, but you can use your health account to pay for it. It's eligible for that, your FSA. And then there's like a $5 monthly fee for it. So
which will soon double to 10, I'm sure.
Exactly. All right, Christine, what do you got for us today?
Let's look at Fox, shall we? So ticker FOX, those shares are up today, 1.9%, and that is because there is some suggestion from President Donald Trump that Fox chairman Lachlan Murdoch and his father Rupert are involved in this TikTok deal. Now, we know from the White House official announcement on Saturday that the U.S. operations of TikTok will be majority owned and controlled by American investors, which includes Oracle. Now, Oracle has seen the benefit of being involved in this TikTok deal last week. I mean, it was doing monster numbers in terms of the stock gains. But now, potentially, if there is some kind of Fox family involvement, then maybe that's a boost to those shares as well. Bloomberg Intelligence weighing in and saying that ownership in TikTok could give Fox a foothold in social media because now linear TV is facing secular challenges. So good time for them.
It's eternally facing secular challenges.
Yes.
Pfizer, of course, on the horizon too, and some M&A news.
Yeah, absolutely, Scarlett. So Pfizer, ticker PFE, those shares are soaring 2.9% at the moment. And, you know, we know that they're going to be paying $4.9 billion for this obesity drug startup Metsera because they do want to catch up to their rivals in that obesity drug game. So here's the kicker for the deal, though. So basically, they're agreeing to buy Metsera for $47.50 in cash per share. And then the deal also includes further payments of up to $22.50 per share if there are specific and regulatory milestones that are met. So potentially that deal could total $7.3 billion. And so Bloomberg Intelligence analysts saying that this is a good thing for Pfizer. The deal could potentially catapult them up the obesity ladder because it provides them access to injections that are highly competitive in terms of their profile.
All right. We'll have Sam Fazeli from Bloomberg Intelligence on later this hour to break down this deal. One more.
Let's take a look at Kenvue. So ticker KVUE, those shares not doing so hot at the moment, down more than 5% now. And that's because we did get a Washington Post report over the weekend saying that Trump administration officials plan to link the active ingredient in Tylenol, which is made by Kenvue, to autism. So that's expected to come today. The Post reporting this and citing unnamed people familiar with the matter. So, you know, Bloomberg Intelligence saying that if there is any reduced demand for Tylenol as a result of this, then that will make their return to EPS growth this next year more challenging because they're already facing autism-related lawsuits because of this. So this is just another piece of bad news.
Tylenol is the go-to drug for me. It fixes everything. So I can't do anything about that. All right. Christine, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Christine Aquino, Bloomberg News, giving us some of those movers there. For more conversations like this, subscribe to our Stock Movers Reports. Listen 4 or 5 minute audio reports on the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Subscribe to Stock Movers on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen. Red headline crossing the Bloomberg Terminal. New York City Group knocks out final bid for a Manhattan casino. No idea what that means, but I know the casino's licenses are going to be granted at some point soon in the greater New York City area, and there's a number of groups that are vying for them.
Yeah, this will definitely get all the anti-gambling groups all heated if they're not already. And of course, we've seen how much business they've done in places where they have been able to operate.
All right. All right, let's get back to one of the key stories of the day. That's the H-1B application fee. The Trump administration planning to raise that fee to $100,000. That's going to be an issue, I think, for some in the tech industry who do rely upon these H-1B visa folks here. Matthew Bloxham joins us. He's a technology analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence in our London studio. Hey, Matt, it seems like any change to the H-1B program will have a profound impact on the tech industry. What do you think is going to happen here?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I guess for context, Amazon, according to our data, one of the biggest users of staff with H-1B visas, but also names like Microsoft, Meta, Google in there too. But high up the list as well is Tata Consulting Services, which is one of the big India-based IT services companies, does a lot of outsourcing from big US companies. So I think that kind of cross-section of US tech and also India is quite interesting. Again, data from the US government suggests that nearly 300,000 H-1B visas come or have been applied to Indian citizens, and they're the biggest nation with those visas. So I think it's going to be a big conundrum for both the IT services companies. Do they scale back further on the number of people they have with these visas, which they typically use to be on site with their clients. So it may need a bit of a rethink for their business model, and equally for the big tech firms who've, for many years now used these visas as a way to bring in talent at all levels, but particularly at junior levels, as engineers graduate from US universities,
right,
and bring them into their ranks. So it's a lot of challenges for a lot of companies.
Yeah, and it's causing massive confusion as well. Paul, did you see that there's a video that's been going viral about a flight, an Emirates flight from San Francisco to Dubai on Friday, where a lot of passengers began hearing about this decision, and they asked the pilot to delay the flight so they can get off the plane.
Yep.
I mean, it's what does this mean, Matthew, in terms of how companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and Alphabet deal with their employees? I mean, initially they warned people not to travel overseas, and if they were overseas, to get back into the U.S. as soon as possible.
Yeah. That's right, and I think hopefully we've had some clarity about that. I think on Sunday that the government put out some clarity that A, this only applied to new applications, not existing visa holders, and B, that $100,000 fee was a one-off. It wasn't going to be an annual recurring fee that they had to pay. So I think particularly that issue around this is only for new applicants certainly kind of eased some people's concerns about scrambling to get back to the US if they were out of the country.
Matthew, to what extent do tech companies rely upon H-1B workers, and how has that changed over time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big reliance. So I think our data is something like 10,000 employees at Amazon, for example, are on this visa. And as I say, that the big Indian tech outsourced firms are very big users of these too. So thousands of employees across these big companies, and really important for their software engineering team. So I think the fact that this is only going to start for new applications gives them maybe a 2 or 3 year window to kind of readjust their recruiting policies, but they're certainly going to have to think hard about where do they source developer talent, and they're going to have to look a lot more at US talent to kind of fill that in over the midterm, and maybe that's going to shift their engagement perhaps with US universities and what kind of programs they fund to make sure they're going to be compliant with the way this program is going to work from here.
All right, Matthew, thank you so much. Matthew Bloxham is a Bloomberg Intelligence tech analyst joining us from London. Paul, you look at the numbers, 85,000 H-1B visas issued each year. 20,000 are set aside for advanced degree holders, people with master's or above.
Yep, and from what I've heard from some experts here, it's really, it's a lottery. Yep. And it's not particularly a fair lottery. Certain big tech companies have an inside track or know how to play the system a little bit better than others.
They've gamed it well.
Yep.
All right, this is Bloomberg Intelligence with Paul Sweeney and Scarlet Fu. Keep it right here on Bloomberg Radio.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. We're being brought to you by Oracle. Attention, growing businesses. Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. This is for new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. The major stock averages mixed to little change right now. The S&P 500 is down just a point, 66.63 after last week's records. Dow Jones Industrial Average, that's down 119 points. The NASDAQ Composite Index is higher, 28 points higher. That's up 0.1%. It's Apple and Tesla that are leading the NASDAQ higher right now. Apple, that'll be floating nearing a record right now, up 2.7%. And some of the big movers, Pfizer agreeing to buy the obesity startup Metsera for an enterprise value of $4.9 billion. They're trying to catch up in the market for obesity drugs. Metsera shares, look at this, 63% higher. And then you have Tylenol maker Kenvue shares, they're lower. This follows the Washington Post report that the Trump administration plans to link the active ingredient in Tylenol to autism. Kenvue shares right now down 5.7%. And BYD shares dropping the most in 3 weeks. You had this report that Warren Buffett's investment firm offloaded its stake in the Chinese electric vehicle maker. And we check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash, Scarlett and Paul.
All right. Thank you so much, John Tucker. Oracle has become the stock of the year.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's got an $890 million market cap. It's near a record high, and I feel like it's having its NVIDIA moment where people are rethinking what it is and what it does. It used to be this legacy enterprise software maker, but it's become so much more. It's become shorthand for AI. So let's bring in Sylvia Jablonski. She is CEO and CIO at Defiance ETFs. And Defiance ETFs has a lot of leveraged and single name thematic ETFs that they issue, and they have seen a lot of activity, Sylvia, in names like Oracle. What kind of interest is there in from retail investors in particular and institutional investors in Oracle-related products?
Yeah, good morning to you both. So Oracle, you described it really well, right? It's a lot of the retail audience has come back to find some of these companies that we haven't talked about in so long, right? IBM, Oracle, they've really linked themselves to the forefront of quantum computing, supercomputing, and AI. And so Oracle, we've just seen a ton of flows in Oracle. That last earnings call was just stellar for them. And we really now see this company that's, not only this classic, tech company that's been around forever, but now they're at the forefront of AI hyperscaling, AI infrastructure, cloud, data center management, quantum computing. They landed multi-million-dollar contracts with various firms and things like this. And so it's just a company that's on the map. And just that theme keeps growing in general.
Another, I guess, offspring of the AI trade is energy. We're going to have to power some of these data centers here. How are you seeing investors kind of position for that?
Right. And so it's interesting because AI, it's always like this, right? You kind of have like this theme that comes out, and then you have to see where the puck is going to go next. And you kind of start thinking like, where else are opportunities? And I think that lies in both energy and infrastructure, right? So in order to power all of these data centers and power blockchain and crypto mining and all of these things, you're going to need nuclear energy, you're going to need different forms of energy, and you're going to need infrastructure and build out. And so a lot of the companies that have been catching tailwinds on that are things like, Oklo and GE Vernova and, kind of the large semiconductor companies as well that we know, NVIDIA, AMD, and things like this. But, that kind of mix of the energy companies too, in order to power this theme has really started to take off.
I know that we keep talking about energy as like the second derivative of the AI play, but are people picking companies specifically, or are they still betting on the sector at large?
I think they're doing both, right? Like you definitely have these names that are starting to shine, whether it's an AI, like AI has always kind of been NVIDIA, and then maybe it started to trickle down to Oracle and Palantir and Broadcom, but I think that overall, for most investors that don't know the space really well, which is actually most of us, right? Like thinking about the 2,000 companies that participate, we could probably name the top 5. We probably can't name the top 100. A lot of them are looking towards ETFs for that. Like we actually have an AI-powered infrastructure ETF, APO. There's a quantum one out there. Other companies have different types of AI, cloud computing types of companies, robotics companies. And I think that investors tend to be comfortable with picking portfolios of stocks for this, even for the reason that some of the smaller names might have stellar performance, but might also be susceptible to bigger crashes. So you kind of get this ballast of having an index. It's really what ETFs were meant for, and starting to show up in the infancy of AI and all of these big themes.
Sylvia, just broadly, stepping back 30,000 foot level, how are the flows right now in the ETF space that you're seeing? How has that maybe changed throughout the year?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a record year of flows really for ETFs and some types of ETFs in particular, right? So you just see, massive flows into crypto. We've seen a huge growth in single name levered ETFs. You probably had a third of what is here now last year. We've seen a lot of flow into the AI space, into thematics and active ETFs. I read a stat the other day that was put out. It's about 36% of all new ETF flow has gone into active ETFs. And so that's really telling. Investors are more open-minded, I think, now to act. Before it was just like, give me something that's passive and cheap that I can hold forever, not think about. And now investors are thinking like, wow, these are, great products that give me access to these themes that I can't trade myself. And that's sort of worth it. And so it makes sense that you've really seen the growth in those areas.
I'm so glad you bring up crypto, because crypto definitely had a moment over the summer with all the digital, the DAT companies, right? But it feels like that momentum is fading a little bit, and gold has picked up a lot of the momentum. You look at spot gold topping $3,500. How are investors differentiating between digital gold, that is Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies, and old school gold, the physical gold?
I think there's room for both, right? It's almost, we can make that parallel with AI, right? NVIDIA is always going to be kind of the golden child of AI, but now you have all of these smaller companies that have come into play that, perhaps investors haven't even heard of just yet, right? And I think gold has always been that classic inflation hedge, and for investors that have experienced and have been in the market for multiples of decades, that's probably their go-to for inflation hedging. But perhaps that next generation trader is going to start looking at crypto, right? And I think with crypto, not only do you have the potential of the inflation play, but you also have this growth with the commercialization of it, the growth in ETFs, all these different crypto companies that are coming out, like Circle, Bitmine, emergent companies. There's just been this explosion in that sector and really buy-in into that theme from particularly younger investors.
Sylvia, as ETF product matures as an asset class there, how have you seen the investor mix change, retail versus institutional? How's that played out from your perspective?
It's really been amazing. When I started my career in ETFs, mutual funds were still the winners, right? And you would have these conversations at whatever company you worked for that mutual funds are the thing, and we really have to compete with them. And now it's kind of like, it's just switched completely. It's flipped. I think investors are comfortable with the idea that they can trade intraday and get a value for what they trade throughout the day, and not just an end of day NAV strike. The fees are arguably still lower on most ETFs versus mutual funds. I think the younger generation of retail traders and retail investors, they probably don't even know what what the difference is between a mutual fund and ETF, but they probably only hold the ETF. So I just think that there's just this big shift towards ETFs, and you kind of see that in the conversions that a lot of the larger companies are doing. That being said, no knock on mutual funds, obviously. I just think that it's a different type of flexible product that has just really taken over in terms of interest.
Well, you are, of course, loyal to the ETF world, Sylvia. Sylvia Jablonski joining us. Thank you so much. Sylvia, CEO and CIO of Defiance ETFs. Paul?
All right, it is United Nation week here in New York City.
Feels like a month.
It feels like a month, so we're all ready for it, gearing up for it, because it means just a lot of traffic, a lot of changes in road closures and so on and so forth as the UN gets together. Miles Miller, Bloomberg News, a senior reporter. He's all over this. Miles, thanks for joining us here in our studio. What's the expectations for this year's UN Assembly?
Yeah, you should expect that, you know, a number of nations are coming at a time when there are conflicts around the world. And because of that, there is extra security this year. We went to the United Nations on Thursday of last week, and you saw the preparations they were putting into place. Of course, this United Nations General Assembly comes on the backdrop of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And so that means extra security, and they're studying that shooting to make sure that if something were to happen in Manhattan, they know how to get these 150 leaders and their spouses to where they need to get to.
One thing that you point out in your reporting is that the security surrounds the United Nations complex right alongside the East River on 42nd Street. And this building is actually really difficult to protect. It's not a fortress. It's, you know, glass, and it's kind of designed to be open, which is at odds with the security required for the event.
Right. When built in the 1950s with the air of transparency, Long Island City wasn't as vibrant as it is today. You know, a big security target, obviously. You know, we went to the top of the Dag Hammarskjöld library. The top 2 floors used to be, I mean, when you go in, it's gorgeous. It's like straight out of the 60s, right? Mid-century modern furniture and all that kind of stuff. But the floor is completely barren because of the security threat that place occupies. You know, it's right by the FDR Drive. You know, if somebody wanted to do something untoward from across on, you know, nearby Sutton Place or, you know, in that area, it'd be very easy. And so, yes, they have the vaporwake dogs that are sniffing for bombs. They've got the sharpshooters who are on the top of the roof. They're marrying UN security with NYPD and Secret Service. And actually, what was really interesting is to learn that the security guards from the United Nations go down to Maryland, train with the Secret Service to figure out how you get people out of a sticky situation if one were to happen.
President Trump will be attending the United Nations. What's on his agenda?
Yeah, I think, you know, one thing we know is he'll be meeting with the heads of some Arab nations while he's here. These are meetings that they call on the sidelines of the summit, so he won't be meeting with them at the UN, but at hotels and that kind of thing, a number of meetings. It comes at a time when the U.S. has gone in this sort of isolationist path, you know, go it alone sort of path. And it also comes at a time, you know, we were talking about it earlier, where the United States is not paying its debts to the United Nations. And so,
how much do we owe the UN?
Oh, I put it here because I didn't want to make a mistake on that. $3 billion, including $826 million tied to this year's regular budget. The rest is in arrears from past years and unpaid peacekeeping bills. But you saw it when Trump came into office, right? What we saw specifically was a pullback from U.S. aid, a pullback in a lot of funding UNESCO and Human Rights Council and NATO as well. And so these unpaid bills will carry consequences under the UN's charter. Countries that fall 2 years behind their bills lose their vote in the General Assembly. We'll see what happens with that.
What about the Security Council? Because the U.S. is one of the permanent members of the Security Council.
Right. So so you sort of have to figure out what will happen here. Of course, Trump is going to meet with the head of the UN. He's going to try to make the case that, you know, that U.S. is not going to go it alone, but will be working in partnership. That remains to be seen. The Secretary General will be making the case that the U.S. should be paying its bills. But this really goes to the diplomatic approach, right? The U.S. did not have, someone assigned to the United Nations. That just got through, of course, last week.
All right. And President Trump is set to deliver his speech to the United Nations on Tuesday morning. Miles Miller, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Miles Miller, Bloomberg News, a senior reporter, giving us a preview of the United Nations taking place in Midtown Manhattan. We'll have more coming up. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Let's start off with shares of Apple. Right now, they're up 2.8%, turning positive for the year. So they're extending right now, rebound that's put the iPhone maker back within striking distance of record territory. It's helping boost the major averages. The S&P 500, it has turned positive. So, yeah, that's good for a record. 6670 on the index, up 6 points right now. The NASDAQ 100, 45 points higher. That is up 0.2%. That would be a record if it holds up. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 40 points. That's a decline of about 0.1%. The big deal news of the day, Pfizer paying about $4.9 billion for the obesity startup Metsera in a bid to catch up to rival drug makers after they failed to compete with its own weight loss medication. And shares right now, Metsera, that is one of the standouts, up 63%. And then you have Pfizer shares that are also higher, up 2.3%. White House officials saying Oracle would recreate and provide security for a new U.S. version of TikTok's algorithm. This is part of a deal taking shape to sell TikTok to a group of American investors. It's pretty much what lawmakers had insisted upon as well. And you have shares of Oracle right now. They are up 3.1%. T-Mobile announcing a CEO transition with COO taking over as T-Mobile's next CEO effective November 1st of this year. T-Mobile shares up fractionally, up about 0.25%. Once again, the major average of mixed. S&P 500, 5 points higher right now. We check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Scarlett and Paul.
All right, JT, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Scarlett Fu and Paul Sweeney live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming live on YouTube as well. Scarlett, here's a story that just popped up at me. Royal Caribbean going back into the bond market. They just got upgraded by Fitch. They're going to sell more debt.